much for joining me here, Abhishek and Mikhail. It's really great to talk to you all today about Fabric Data Factory. One thing I think is really exciting about Fabric Data Factory is that it works for everyone without the usual overhead. If you think about how a data analyst approaches data versus how a data engineer does it, they're coming at it from completely different angles with different tools, use cases, all of that. Data Factory meets both of them where they are. The cool part is that no matter which path you take, everything ends up in the same governed OneLake. Abhishek, let's say I'm a data engineer and I'm writing SQL all day. Can you walk me through how I can use CopyJob and dbt for an everyday business use case?
Awesome, absolutely. So I'll take you through how you can, as a data engineer, easily build data models that you would use for reporting. And as part of that, you need some key aspects as part of building those models. And one of those things are CopyJob, because you want the raw data to be ingested into a warehouse or a lakehouse before you start doing the modeling. And then we have dbt job, which allows you to write SQL transformations, and you can model your data using SQL, which is quite commonly used in the industry. And then you can combine the two together into a pipeline which will orchestrate the workflow such that whenever there's new data available, it pulls that data via the copy job and then triggers the dbt job for the transformations, for the incremental model updates. And that's how you build a data model. Here's an example on the screen. So this is a Medallion architecture based pipeline, and what it does is it's a metadata driven pipeline where you use a lookup to look up certain metadata that you want to iterate, based on which you want to iterate on. It could be basically a list of table names. And then it runs the copy job to load the data into the bronze staging store. From there, I run dbt transformations, and each one of these is declared in a declarative fashion. For example, the copy job over here, I'm just going to click on the tab, which will show you how it's getting data from an Azure SQL database on the left-hand side and writing it into a lakehouse, right? Similarly, you will see the dbt, on the other hand, which is SQL modeling. You can write SQL transformations. Here you can see the staging tables that we have. It's reading the data, creating a stage tables in the warehouse. And from there, it's adding additional fields into my customers and the products table. It's adding, loyalty tier, it's appending row numbers and so on. And you can declare macros and a lot of complex things with your own functions, or you can use the data build tools, public packages as well. So these are very helpful helper functions that you may use to add functionality to your project without having to write a lot of SQL lines of code. So with all these things, once stitched up, you can easily configure the warehouse. In this case, I have a warehouse called Java Warehouse where this is writing the data into. And then finally, I will end up with a Medallion pipeline, which I showed you earlier. And I would stitch in a report layer as well, right? So once I have done the lookup into my metadata, so I can actually control this pipeline execution through, updating the metadata as well. That gives that aspect. Once I load the data, then I transform the data with dbt job. And then finally, I will do a semantic model refresh just to make sure all my reports, which is consuming this data, is consuming the updated data sets as well. And I'm tying all of these together in a single pipeline, which is Medallion pipeline. Makes it super easy for me to manage and observe whenever things change, fails. And this is how, as a data engineer, I'm leveraging the best of both the worlds. I'm leveraging SQL for transformations. I'm leveraging CopyJob for the easiest way of ingesting data with the power of warehouse and orchestration that is available in pipeline. So
wonderful. Awesome. Thank you so much for talking me through it. This is super helpful. Okay, so Miguel, let's say I'm a data analyst. I live in Power Query and I don't really write code. Can you walk me through how I'd use Dataflow Gen2 for an everyday business use case?
Sure. So when you think about Power Query, you're pretty familiar with how it works probably in Excel on Power BI Desktop. And when you think about data flows, just think about Power Query on the cloud. So whatever it is that you already have created inside of Power Query can just work in Dataflow. So I'm going to show you one of the most common use cases that people use Dataflows for. And what I have here is really two data sources. Now, how do I know that it's actually two data sources? This is where something new called the diagram view comes into play that you don't have in Power Query. And this is where I can see that, okay, so I have this query, which is coming from an old data source. And then I have other tables that actually come from SQL. The business case here is that I have two data sources, and it's for different systems that I have to join together or combine into a single table. I have a list of customers from one side, which is the SQL Server side, and they have another one that actually comes from this old data source. And they all have to be appended and merged into a single unified dim customer or dimensional customer table. So that's what I'm going to be showing you right here. Now, this view, thus far, it doesn't look that appealing because it's just 4 tables, which are really 4 queries. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with the one that says sales LT customer. So from sales LT customer, I can actually expand this data preview. And then I'm going to be waiting on the data preview. Or if I wanted to, I can also check down here on the schema view. So the schema view is going to be what I see in here, which is actually just a list of the columns. Now, with this schema view, it's much faster. It doesn't have to compute all of the data preview. And all I have to do here is just select what are the columns that I want to bring. So I'm going to be bringing, really, instead of all of them, just customer ID. Let's bring the first name, the last name, and perhaps we want to have something else. What else do we have? I think that we can just, for now, let's simplify it with just those. I can go ahead to the schema tools that you see here, and then click where it says remove all the columns. I can also do something else, which is that I can probably just merge these 2 columns, and I can do so with the right click, or I can do so through the transform tab, and then say here where it says merge columns. In merge columns, I'm just going to create a single column that is just going to be the full name. So it's going to have a space in between the first name and the last name. Now that I have that, I could potentially go back to the data preview to actually see how this looks like. And what I'm going to be able to see is just 2 columns. I should be able to see the customer ID, and finally should be able to see the full name.
Awesome. Okay, now Miguel, let's say I'm a data analyst. I live in Power Query and I don't really write code. Can you walk me through how I'd use Dataflow Gen2 for an everyday business use case?
Absolutely. So if you come from Power Query, think about Dataflows as Power Query on the cloud. And that's really what it is. It's really the tool that you love in Excel and Power BI Desktop, now with the scalability and the performance that you need in a SaaS service. So what we're going to be doing here, and what you're looking at on the screen, is really a solution that I've developed. And the business here, business case really is that I have multiple systems. I have 2 systems. Each of them have different customer information. And what I would like to do is really join those 2 into a single table that I can append, and then later into a single storage that I can later use for analytics. So that's what we're looking at here. It's really 2 sources. One of them is actually a SQL Server in Fabric, and the other one is OData. So I'm going to be looking at the first one. And the first one, as you can see, is really 2 queries that later get merged into one, which is this one. And the first one, if we look at the address, it's really just the address of every single customer that I have. So it's going to look like this. And again, it's really the Power Query experience that you know and love, but now on the cloud. So this is the table called sales LT address, or the query sales LT address. And then we have another one, which is called the sales LT customer address. What I do is that I take the customer and I have the address, because this is going to be information that I want to store later on in my dim customer table. So that's what happens here. We join those 2 tables from my SQL Server. I try to normalize this into a schema that will fit or will conform to what I have on my final destination. And for the data from the OData, it's similar. What we're looking at is really just customer data, and I'm going to try to conform and do some magic happening to what actually happens in or the schema that I have to conform in the destination. So this is what I'm looking at here. It has the source customer ID. I also have some information about company, full name, city, and all of those transformations that I've done so far. And finally, once I have those two tables already in a similar schema, I'm able to actually append those two. And to append, the pen is really just the same that we have in Excel. In Power BI Desktop, you just click on Append Queries, and you select the queries that you want to append. You can even do it from here and get just a list of the tables and then just move them however you want. And the final outcome is this table that I have as tip customers. And this is one unified way and really one of the most common patterns that we see people using Dataflow Gen2 today. People can come from Power Query.
Awesome. And thank you so much, Miguel, for showing us that. And I think that's really some of the magic of Fabric Data Factory. You have these two different personas or people with totally different problems and different ways of working, and they're able to accomplish what they need to in the same platform. So you're not paying for duplicate pipelines, you're not stitching governance together across tools, and because everything lands in OneLake, your BI team and your AI workloads all are working from the same data. Miguel and Abhishek, thanks so much for your time.